Hello, and welcome to the Gravel Ride podcast. I'm your host, Craig Dalton. This week on the podcast, we welcome Nicolas Serrano from Scarab Cycles in Colombia. I met Nicolas at the Enve Builder Roundup earlier this year and was super impressed with the bike they brought to the Roundup, the paint job, and even more impressed once I learned the story behind Scarab Cycles. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Enve Composites. Enve has been a huge supporter of the gravel industry, producing products since the inception of this type of riding. You can look at their forks, their handlebars, their seat posts, and of course, their line of gravel wheel sets. Make sure to follow Enve across all social media channels and check out Enve.com for a dealer locator. I know it's always great to go into your local bike retailer and get your hands on these products, and even better yet, maybe getting out on a test ride on some of these components. Before we jump in, I want to send a huge shout out to all the new members from buymeacoffee.com/thegravelride. It means a ton to me that you've selected to support me with your dollars. Memberships start at $5 a month. So big thanks to John Rankin, to Nicolas Marzano, High Plains Drifter, Mark Est, just a few of the most recent members to the buymeacoffee.com program. And further thank you to the one-time contributors. With that said, let's dive right into my interview.
Hi, it's Nicolas from Scarab Cycles from Colombia.
Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for inviting us, and we're pretty happy to be here with you.
And I'm pretty excited to talk about that bike I just saw downstairs here at the Enve Roundup. It's totally beautiful. But before we get into that, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and what led to the formation of the company, and a little bit about the company?
Yeah, of course. So Scarab Cycles started back in the day 6 years ago. Our founder, Santiago Toro, who started the company with a local frame builder. It used to have another name before, and then it migrated to what nowadays is Scarab Cycles. As a name, it started in 2018 with the name Scarab Cycles, but we've been building bikes since 2016, more or less.
And tell us about where the company is located.
So our company is based in the outskirts of Medellin. It's in El Retiro, Antioquia. It's more or less 30 minutes from Medellin, which is the second biggest city in Colombia.
And does Colombia have a large bike building scene?
Not a bike building scene, but it's home of the world-known Escarabajos, which is basically we export world-class cyclists. So there's not a strong bike building scene. There's a couple of 1, 2, or 3 frame builders in the country, but mostly what we have in our country is cyclists. There's a strong love for the sport. The bicycle itself, it's a very strong object or thing for the Colombian culture. So it's not only a way of transportation, it's not only a sport, it's just a way of life, a way of being. And it's an element, the bicycle, that connects us all as Colombians. You can go to a road and you can be with a farm guy, a campesino, which he's just training in his Sunday ride, and you can actually be riding with a pro. So these two guys are going up the same mountain, and they're just like shredding their ass off at very high speed. Or you just can have on weekdays a kid going from his very small town moving to another small town to go to school. So basically, the bicycle is a very strong element in the Colombian culture.
That's awesome to hear. Football and soccer, obviously, big sports as well. How would you rank cycling? I mean, obviously, like with Nairo Quintana going back 5-6 years, and all the emerging Colombian superstars today, was that sort of the generation where cycling really took hold in the culture, or does it date back further than that?
It comes back way that with loads, like when we started having world-class cyclists going to big races in Europe, winning the Vuelta a España, for example. That's when we started like getting a name of cycling, and that's when they started calling us Escarabajos, this climbing little bug that goes up and up a hill without any problem. He just is very good for climbing. So it goes back to the 80s, 90s, when everything started, 70s, 80s, and 90s. But there's been a new hype since Nairo Quintana, as you mentioned it, since 2005, 8. But back before from that, we had another hype with, for example, cyclists like Santiago Otero, which was he was the Olympic champion for time trial, individual time trial, and then he won as well the polka dotted jersey and the Tour de France. So there's a lot of history behind cycling. But nowadays, I believe it's, as you asked at the beginning of the question, if it was soccer or cycling, I bet we're having a very good and strong hype around cycling, not only because of the results, but the pandemic has like moved people towards this sport. So nowadays everyone in Colombia has a bicycle and it's riding around. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it was just like a couple of hundreds of people. Now it's thousands. The streets are packed with cyclists in all of the levels. Like you see very good cyclists, like pro class cyclists and amateur cyclists, and like everyone's riding a bicycle. From kids 10 years old to like people 60, 70, 80 years old.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Just sharing the road. It's amazing. It's crazy. And we also have another very good thing is that Colombia, it's divided by 3 mountain ranges. So there's mountains everywhere. So there's 86 kilometer climbs, all paved, which is called Alto de Letras. There's as well 100 kilometer gravel uphill rides, which is called, for example, El Crucero. So you go from almost 0 meters above sea level to 4,200 meters above sea level. That's 12,000 feet
Incredible.
Of elevation just in one ride. So there's many aspects, a little bit of history, a little bit of good results with Nairo Quintana, Egan Bernal, and all those cyclists doing very good in the cycling scene. And of course, the topography of our country and the culture, which has very deeply embedded the bicycle in its culture.
So tell me a little bit more about the brand, and when the brand came together, what type of bikes were you intending to make? What types of materials were you using at the time?
Yeah, so we've always been we've always been very happy with the results we can have with steel bikes. So we've always been using steel. We've always been using, for example, a Columbus steel, which is what we still use. Nowadays, we're mixing a little bit, doing some blends, for example, Columbus and Kaisei, or Colombians and Dedakai, which is an Italian manufacturer of steel as well. And when it started, our first bikes were mainly meant to stay on tarmac. But given the conditions of the country where 90% of our roads are secondary roads, that means it's a gravel country. So it's basically a gravel paradise where we used to ride our road bikes in gravel conditions. Taking into account that they were very good steel frames, there wasn't a problem with that. But then we started diving into the gravel section. And then our first model was born maybe 4 years ago. It was called Murillo. Murillo is a town that's located in the central mountain range, which is called it lays almost 4,000 meters above sea level. So it's a town that you can only get there by. So that was our first model, and then it evolved to where this town is located, which is a páramo. Páramo is an ecosystem that lies between 3,200 meters above sea level to 4,200 meters above sea level. And that's basically the source of all of our water. Our hydric sources come from the páramos. So it's a very fragile yet unique ecosystem. You can only get there by secondary roads or gravel roads. So that's where our bike came from. It comes out of function, and then function follows form, which is why we create a little bit of bigger tire clearance, a little bit more responsive, wheelbase a little bit longer to have more fun when you're going down. So then we had to do a little bit of twitches in the aspects of the frame, and then was when the Páramo was born, which is our actual gravel bike.
So the model name for the bike that I'll show in a picture and link to in the show notes, which model is that?
So that's the Apuna, which is, Santi likes to call it, it's a road bike with trekking shoes. So it's a road-specific bike. Well, not a road-specific bike. It's an all-road bike, but it has the reactiveness, the stiffness, the responsiveness of a road bike. But it has tires. It can fit tires from 32 to 38 millimeters. So it's very good if you're running on tarmac, the tarmac ends, and then you want to go around for trails or hard-packed gravel. You're going to have, for example, this morning we did some of the trails with the guys in that bike, and it was perfect. Well, not the perfect bike for that conditions, but we did it, and it was fun. So that we have 3 models at the moment, which are our road bike, which is called Letras. It's named after the longest paved climb in Colombia, which is 86 kilometers. That's a road bike, a proper road bike, stiff, fun, reactive. There's disc and rim brake model. And then comes the in-betweener, which is the all-road. It's a mix between road bike and gravel bike. So it's this in-betweener that has tire clearance from 32 to 38 millimeters. It's called Apuna, which it means road in Spanish, sendero or trocha, in an indigenous tongue, in an indigenous language. So that's where Apuna comes from. And then comes the Paramo, which is a proper gravel bike, meant for like proper bike packing, shredding, killing it in the descents, going uphill, everything you want. That's the indestructible bike.
Let's talk about the tire clearance on that particular bike.
Perfect, yeah. So that one, since all our bikes are custom made, it depends on what the client needs. It can be optimized either for 700C, 700 by 48, or it can be optimized for 650B by 50 millimeters. And depending on in some cases we've run bigger. It depends on what the client wants. So there comes some people with the specific requirements. Yeah, I want this. I'm gonna fit 650Bs by 55. We can manage to it. Or most of them, like standard, it's what we recommend is 650 by 48.
If they do go to those larger sizes, 50 plus, what type of modifications do you need to make to the frame in order to accommodate that kind of big tire volume?
So that's basically in the chainstays, a little bit of more of a wide capability, and we will upgrade to the Enve Adventure fork, which has a bigger tire clearance for the front and for the back. You'll just have a bigger space in the chainstays.
You may not know this figure off the top of your head, but what does the chainstay length turn out to be for a 50-ish?
50-ish? No, I'll owe you that. I'm not sure. I cannot recall like the numbers of the specific geometry, but we usually have, well, it depends on the customer. I'd rather have short chainstays. It makes a little bit more of a fast bike and reactive bike.
Yeah, it's been something I've been thinking about a lot lately because I just got a demo bike that's got longer chain stays and
it's a little bit more sluggish.
Yeah, I'm trying to internalize the personality of this new bike and understand it. So it's been really interesting for me, and now I'm keying in on that length when I'm talking to other builders just to try to understand what you're building around. And obviously, as our listener knows, when you go to the big tires, there has to be some compromises. You need to make the room somehow.
You need to make the room somehow, and that's one of the first questions we ask our clients. What are you going to use this bike for? But usually you don't have a right answer for that, because I might be doing some really fast trails when I buy this bike, but then I discover bikepacking or bikepacking races across the world, or just, I don't know, very long races, or like I want to have something very comfortable with a bigger tire clearance. So it might change over the time, but we usually always center on what the client needs, on what you want, and where do you want to take your bike to.
Yeah. Can you talk me through the beautiful paint job on the bike we saw downstairs?
That's the most amazing thing of our bike. First, we're launching the Apuna, which is the old road bike. And second, we're launching our new paint scheme called Jungla, which means jungle. And it's basically inspired in the western part of the country. We have a very deep jungle, which is called the Chocoan rainforest. And it's one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. It's home for lots of species, fauna and flora. Many are endangered, many are endemic, many are unique of that area. And there's just a couple of roads, or basically one road that leads into the jungle. It's a 120-kilometer gravel ride, very muddy. It depends on the time of the year you go, but usually it's very muddy because it rains a lot. It's the place with most precipitation on Earth, basically. So it rains every single day.
Wow.
So when you're riding towards the jungle, you just see a huge, deep green sea. It just looks green and very steamy. You just see a big green shade. And then when you start pedaling towards it, you start to discover there's a lot of detail and there's a lot of immensity into that jungle. And then you start to discover a lot of different trees, a lot of different leaves, a lot of different indigenous groups around walking. Maybe you don't see them, but if you look close enough, you see people that are observing you. There's somewhere hidden in the path or in the road, same as animals. If you stop by at a waterfall to fill your bottle up, you might not look carefully enough to see there's a small poisonous frog besides you. So you have to be very careful and look very deep into the forest and enjoy what you're seeing to be able to discover what the forest has to offer you. So basically it's a homage to that Chocoan forest. And that's why when you look at the picture, you see a white bike with green panels. But if you look deep and close enough, you start discovering a little bit of animals, flamingos here and there, turtles, humpback whales, which do their mating season in this part of the world, in the Pacific Ocean, the Colombian Pacific Ocean, in the Gulf of. So basically, that's where our inspiration came from for that paint job. It's a homage to that Chocoan rainforest.
It's absolutely gorgeous. And I think your description did do it some justice, but I'll put a photo up online for people to see, because as you said, there's just a ton of intricate detail in there.
Exactly.
And little things you discover when you get closer and closer. Whereas, as you said, if you're 10 10 feet away, you just see this white bike with green panels. So it's incredibly well executed.
Exactly. That was the idea. That was the exact idea. And that was what we felt when we were pedaling towards this Chocoan forest. We were like, wow, this is a huge green immersed sea. You just see green. You notice between one tree and another. And as soon as you start going in, you're like, wow, this leaf is very different from this one. And there's this animal and this and that. And there's a lot of detail as soon as you get into it. So same when you look at the bike. White bike with green panels, and then when you dive in, there's a lot of detail behind it. And that's one of the best things at Scarab Cycles, that we focus a lot on the painting, on every detail. Everything we do in Scarab Cycles is done in-house. So painting is done in-house, the welding, all of the parts, everything's done in-house. So we have enough time to dedicate to every detail of the painting. So that's one of our crazy ones. We have some more sober ones with basic colors, nice finishes, mattes, glossies with basic lettering from Scarab Cycles. But that's one of our crazy details.
I love it.
Crazy paint schemes. Yes.
For the listeners who are getting excited about buying one of these bikes now, what does that process look like for a North American customer to work with you to get one of these bikes built?
Perfect, yo. So basically, we have worldwide shipping. We have our shop and factory in El Retiro, Antioquia, but we have, of course, a shop as well in Miami, from which our shipping facility for worldwide orders. So if you happen to live in San Francisco and you want to order a bike, it's just drop us an email. We have actually 18-week lead time, and that's where all the process and the magic starts, with a high email quoting, and then we accommodate according to what you want, depending if you want a full bike or a frame set starts at $2,800 and full builds start at $4,000. So depends on what you want. You can first select your model, and then we start to talk a little bit about what you need. What are you going to ride? If you're living in San Francisco, what kind of gravel riding are you going to do? Trails, or you're going to do just hard pack gravel, or bike packing, or long trips, or just aggressive racing? The first 4 to 5 weeks to decide a little bit about the geometry. We present to you the geometry, and we both decide what's best for you. Then comes the fun part, or what I call the fun part because it's the paint part. So you decide one of our paint schemes, season paint schemes. For example, it can be Jungla, can be a Chiva, which is another of our crazy paint schemes, or one of our stock normal paint schemes. You just think a little bit about the color palette. We'll send you some samples, some pictures of samples. Then you decide the colors, and then the process starts all in-house for the fabrication. In week 16, we get your bike ready. We ship it to Miami, and then from there it ships to San Francisco.
And with the customer, if they've ordered a full bike, will it get built up in Miami and then
it will be built up in Miami,
and
assembled in Miami, and then shipped, ready to ride to San Francisco. Yep, it's just out of the box. Just put the front wheel, put the handlebars, and just rock and roll.
Awesome. Well, as you know, I've had the pleasure of seeing one up close in San Francisco, one of our local riders, Patricia.
Ah, yes, Patricia. She has a very amazing bike, this white with pink, pinkish bike. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's very stunning. So if you want to say hello, she's a listener, so you might...
Patricia, we're glad to have you there in San Francisco. We're very happy that you're shredding our bike the proper way. So we're good to know that we have our happy Scarab cyclists in San Francisco.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nicolas, thank you so much for the overview. Congratulations on this bike here at the Enve Builder Roundup. It looks phenomenal, and can't wait to see more of them out there on the trails.
Great. Thanks for the invite to the Gravel Ride podcast. Stay tuned for more upcoming podcasts about this show, because it's been pretty amazing what they've got here.
No doubt.
And we're more than happy to help. And if anyone needs something about Scarab Cycles, we're more than happy to attend your inquiries. Okay?
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks again.
Okay, man. Thanks.
That was amazing to get to know Nicolas a little bit and a little bit more of the story behind Scarab Cycles. I remember getting introduced to riding in Colombia back in episode 75 when Matt Cady was talking about some of the bike packing routes that he had developed in that beautiful country. And he just relayed so many great stories about the off-road terrain, the mountains, and everything else about the Colombian experience. So to get to sit down with Nicolas here in the United States when he was over for the Enve Builder Roundup was a huge pleasure. Definitely go out and seek some pictures of what Scarab Cycles does with their bicycles. The paint jobs are exceptional. The quality of work, just a lot of dedicated craftsmanship under the hood there. Huge thanks to Enve for continuing to support the podcast. It's been a pleasure interviewing all these builders and seeing the Enve components highlighted across all these bicycles. If you are interested in supporting the show, sharing it with a friend is very much appreciated. Ratings and reviews are hugely helpful in the podcast game. And obviously visiting buymeacoffee.com/thegravelride is a direct way to financially support what I'm doing here at the podcast. If you want to get in touch, please hit me up over at the Ridership. If you're not already a member to this free global cycling community, just visit www.theridership.com for your free invitation. Until next time, here's to finding some dirt under your wheels.